The phone screen lit up in the dim room, displaying the notification. Transfer $2,000 to Hunter Cole. Transaction successful. I stared at it, feeling a mix of familiarity and emptiness. Sending money on the 10th of each month had become a ritual, an obligation I could never forget. I sank into the worn sofa, the blue light from the screen casting shadows on my weary face after a 12-hour shift, the faint smell of garbage still clinging to my jacket. I lingered on the message for a few seconds as if waiting for it to say something. A thank you, or at least some meaning for my silent sacrifices. But it just sat there, cold and mute, leaving me alone in the dark apartment where the void in my heart grew ever larger. I'm Carson Cole, 33, living alone in a rented apartment in Aurora, a dull suburb of Denver. My place is nothing special. A small living room with a frayed sofa, a kitchen corner with a fridge that hums noisily every night, and a single bed where I rarely get enough sleep. My job is collecting trash for the city. Grueling, dirty, but steady. I wake at 4 in the morning, don my orange uniform, drive the garbage truck through sleeping streets and quietly clean up what others leave behind. My monthly paycheck isn't much, enough to cover rent, cheap groceries, and a little savings. But most of it, as always, goes to my parents. $2,000, the money I send so they can keep going, so Mom can afford her diabetes medication, so Dad can maintain his image as a respectable man in the neighbors' eyes. My father, Hunter Cole, 62, was once a bank employee. He loves recounting his glory days when he wore suits, shook hands with important people, and was admired. But that's the past. 10 years ago, he lost his job when the bank downsized. Since then, he's lived on pride, spinning embellished tales of his golden era. He still wears crisp dress shirts, still walks with his back straight, but I know that behind the facade is a man clinging to illusions. My mother, Riley, 59, is the only one who sees the truth. She has diabetes, requiring regular medication that isn't cheap. Mom knows I'm the one keeping this family afloat, but she never says it. I see it in her eyes, gratitude mixed with shame, as if she fears that saying thank you would anger Dad, bruise his ego for being provided for by his son. Then there's Stetson, my younger brother, 31, a self-proclaimed high-end real estate agent in Denver. He lives in a different world, one where Instagram and Twitter overflow with photos of him posing in front of sleek cars, wearing expensive suits and boasting about million-dollar deals. But I know the truth. Stetson is drowning in debt, from credit cards to bank loans. His image is built on lies and carefully edited photos. He never asks about my job, never checks if I'm okay. To Stetson, I'm just the older brother who collects trash not worth his attention. To the neighbors, the Cole family is a picture of perfection. They see my father, Hunter, always appearing with a confident smile, regaling them with stories of his banking days. They see my mother, Riley, with her neatly combed hair, always polite and gentle. They see Stetson, the successful young man driving a BMW, posting check-ins at upscale restaurants. They think we're a model middle-class family, happy, fulfilled, admirable. No one knows the truth. No one knows that their praised house is held together by the money I send. No one knows that each time transfer successful flashes on my phone, I feel further from that home. As if I'm not part of it, just an outsider silently paying the price to keep their perfect family portrait intact. I can't remember the last time my parents called me. Maybe a few months ago when Mom asked if I could send extra money to fix the house's plumbing. I sent it as always, without question. I don't know why I keep doing it. Maybe because I still hold a faint hope that one day they'll look at me and say, "Carson, thank you." But that hope, like the long night shifts, only leaves me more exhausted. I closed the window, turned off the light, and lay on the bed. The fridge's steady hum persisted, a reminder that my life, though dull and lonely, must go on. I closed my eyes, trying to sleep, but my mind kept conjuring the image of my parents' house. A house I've never truly belonged to, despite paying for it with everything I have. I tossed and turned on the single bed, trying to shake off the emptiness, but it clung to me like the chill of a Denver winter. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Mom. "Carson, come home for dinner tomorrow night?" It's been a while since the family gathered. I sat up, my heart beating a little faster. How long had it been since I'd been home? 3 months? 4? My previous visits were fleeting, just to drop off money for plumbing repairs or utility bills. But this time, Mom was reaching out, inviting me back. A rare warmth crept into my chest. It might just be a family dinner, but to me it felt like an invitation to belong again. A chance to feel like I was still part of the Cole family. The next evening, I stood before the house in the suburbs where I grew up. The 2-story white-painted home with its wooden fence and the small garden Mom tended looked as picturesque as my memories. But I knew that behind that door lay secrets no one wanted to mention. I knocked, took a deep breath, and forced a smile. Mom opened the door, her eyes lighting up at the sight of me, but her smile was strained, as if she were hiding something. "Carson, come in, honey," she said, her voice soft but trembling. The dining table was set, the aroma of roast beef and mashed potatoes filling the air. Dad sat at the head, as poised as ever in a crisp blue dress shirt, his hair neatly combed back. Stetson sat across, his phone next to his plate, fingers swiping as if he couldn't tear his eyes from the screen. I took a seat, feeling both familiar and out of place. "It's been a while, Carson," Dad said, his voice low but carrying a hint of command. "Work going okay?" "It's fine, Dad," I replied, keeping my tone even. I didn't want to mention my 12-hour shifts or waking at 4 a.m. to drive the garbage truck. Dad didn't like hearing about that. To him, my job was something he preferred to forget. Dinner passed with small talk. Mom spoke about her garden, the new roses she'd planted. Stetson bragged about a real estate deal he'd just closed, his voice brimming with enthusiasm, as if the world were his. I nodded, eating bites of roast beef, trying to blend into the moment. In my heart, I thought this was a rare evening, a moment when the Cole family could resemble what the neighbors saw. A happy, reunited family. But then, as Mom brought out the apple pie, the mood shifted. Dad cleared his throat, sitting up straighter, his eyes sharpening. "Carson, your brother has something the family needs to discuss," he said, his tone serious. I stopped chewing, setting down my fork. Stetson looked up from his phone for the first time all evening. Mom sat still, her hands clasped tightly, her gaze avoiding mine. "Stetson's getting married," Dad announced, a note of pride in his voice. "A good girl from a respectable family. The wedding will be at Red Rocks Pavilion, the finest venue in Denver. We'll invite old friends, colleagues, and some important people. It's a chance for the Cole family to shine." I glanced at Stetson. He flashed the smug smile I'd seen 100 times on Instagram. "That's right, Carson," he said. "I want to do something big, not just for me, but for the whole family." I nodded, suppressing a growing unease. Red Rocks Pavilion wasn't cheap. I'd heard about weddings there. Tens of thousands of dollars were standard. But I stayed silent, waiting for Dad to continue. "A wedding like this isn't inexpensive," Dad said, his words measured as if weighing each one. "But the family must pitch in. Carson, as the older brother, you should support Stetson. $15,000. That's your share to show your responsibility and family loyalty." The room fell silent. $15,000. The number hit me like a stone, heavy and suffocating. I looked at Dad, hoping he was joking, but his eyes held only cold calculation. Mom bowed her head, her hands tightening, while Stetson smiled as if he already knew my answer. $15,000? I repeated, my voice hoarse. "Dad, I don't have that kind of money." Dad frowned as if my words were an insult. "Carson, this is about family. Don't you want your brother to have a proper wedding? Don't you want your parents to hold their heads high?" I wanted to scream that I'd been sending $2,000 every month, that I'd lived so frugally I hadn't bought new shoes in 2 years. I wanted to say my job couldn't support Stetson's lavish dreams. But I couldn't. Dad's gaze, Mom's silence, and Stetson's smile felt like a noose around my neck. I'll try," I said, my voice shrinking. Mom looked up, a flicker of pain in her eyes, but she said nothing. Dad nodded, satisfied. "Good. I knew you wouldn't let the family down." That night, I drove back to my apartment, my mind reeling. $15,000. I didn't have it. My account had only a few $100s left after this month's transfer. I thought about refusing, but the image of my parents' pride of Stetson happy on his wedding day haunted me. I wanted them to see me as a reliable brother, a dependable son. I wanted just once to feel like I mattered to them. Days later, I stood at a bank counter, my hands trembling as I signed a loan agreement. The banker, a middle-aged woman with a polite smile, asked if I was sure. "The interest rate is high, Mr. Cole. You'll be paying for 3 years." I nodded, avoiding her eyes. I knew I was digging myself into a hole, but I had no other choice. When the loan was dispersed, I transferred the full $15,000 to Dad's account. The phone screen lit up. "Transfer $15,000 to Hunter Cole. Transaction successful." I stared at it, waiting for a message, a call, even a simple thank you. But there was nothing, just silence, cold and cruel. The days that followed were grueling. I took on extra shifts, working nights. The job grew harsher. I drove the garbage truck through Denver's freezing cold, my hands numb, my back aching. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Every dollar I earned now went to paying off the debt, to keeping my promise to the family. Meanwhile, Stetson's Instagram overflowed with new photos. Him in a suit standing beside his fiancée, beaming at lavish wine tastings. "Counting down to the big day," he wrote. Not a single mention of me. Not a word of thanks. In the suburbs, neighbors still praised the Cole family. "Hunter and Riley raised their kids so well," they said. "Stetson's such a pride." I heard it through Mom in her brief calls where she tried to sound cheerful. No one knew that the wedding, that pride, was built on my sweat and debt. One night I sat in my rented room, the phone's light illuminating my tired face. I opened my bank statement, staring at the note. Family contribution, $15,000. The number was a cruel reminder that I'd sacrificed so much but received nothing but silence in return. I felt a crack in my heart, small, quiet but sharp like shattered glass. It didn't hurt immediately, but I knew it would never heal. In the days leading up to the wedding, I started calling Mom, hoping to contribute something more. Not money, I was tapped out, but time, presence, anything to feel like I still belonged to the family. "Mom, do you need help with the wedding?" I asked, keeping my voice light. But each time her responses were short, detached. "No need, Carson." "Everything's fine," she said, her tone distant as if speaking to an acquaintance rather than her son. Once I tried to prolong the conversation, asking about the menu or guest list, but she always found a way to cut it short. "I'm busy, Carson. Later, okay?" The call ended, leaving me with a long beep and a nameless emptiness. I quietly scrolled through Stetson's Instagram, seeing his wedding preparations. Him in a tailored suit, standing with his fiancée under a sunset at Red Rock's pavilion, ornate invitations, elegant white floral arrangements. Each photo was a stab, but I consoled myself. At least my efforts made this possible, I thought. At least Stetson's wedding will be perfect. I clung to that thought, fragile as a thread about to snap. Then one evening, as I drove the garbage truck through Denver's dark streets, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled over, my hands still reeking of trash, and glanced at the screen. It was Dad. My heart quickened, a flicker of hope sparking. Maybe he wanted to thank me. Maybe he wanted to invite me to the wedding, to stand by Stetson on his big day. I took a deep breath, pressed answer, and steadied my voice. "Dad?" "Carson?" His voice came through cold and sharp like a blade slicing the air. "I need to be clear with you. You shouldn't come to Stetson's wedding. There'll be important guests, media, old friends of mine. If someone asks about your job, about you being a garbage collector, it'll embarrass the family. You understand, right? We need to maintain our image. This is Stetson's day. Don't ruin it." I stood frozen, my hand gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles whitened. The air in the truck's cabin thickened, suffocating me. "Dad, what are you saying?" I asked, my voice trembling. Not from fear, but from a surge of anger and pain rising in my chest. "I've done everything for this family. I've sent money, taken out a $15,000 loan for this wedding. And now you're telling me not to come because I'm an embarrassment? Don't make a scene, Carson. Dad's voice rose, sharp and biting, as if I'd insulted him. You know this family needs to keep up appearances. You chose that job, so you deal with it. Don't make Stetson pay for your selfishness. Do you understand? Selfishness? I nearly shouted, my voice breaking in a rare burst of fury. You call sending $2,000 every month selfish? Call working myself to exhaustion, taking on debt for Stetson's lavish wedding, selfish? Do you know what I've sacrificed? Silence on the other end. Only Dad's heavy breathing, as if he hadn't expected me to push back. Then he lowered his voice, still cold. Carson, I don't want to argue. Just don't come, that's all. Don't make things worse. The call ended, the beep ringing like a hammer to my heart. I sat there in the truck's cabin, the dim streetlights casting a sickly yellow glow on the windshield. Cold wind blew through the window, but I felt nothing except a searing pain in my chest. My father, the man I'd sent money to every month, the man I'd gone into debt to please, had just asked me to vanish from my brother's wedding. Not through a cold text, but in a call filled with cutting words, as if he wanted to ensure I understood my place, an unworthy figure in the Cole family's shining image. To him, honor, reputation, and the facade of a model middle-class family mattered more than blood, more than my sacrifices. The conversation with Dad was like a razor-sharp blade, not only cutting into my heart, but also tearing apart the facade I'd built over the years. I lay on the single bed in my small Aurora apartment, staring wide-eyed at the stained ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. It couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, childhood memories flooded back. Like an old, faded film, blurry yet painfully sharp in its most heartbreaking details. I remembered being a kid, running around the backyard with Stetson, laughing under the summer sun. But even in those moments, I was always in the background. Mom would buy a new toy, a bright red remote-controlled car, and place it in Stetson's hands. "Careful not to break it, my sweet boy," she'd say, ruffling his hair. I stood there holding a faded old car with wobbly wheels, but I didn't speak up. I just smiled, pretending I didn't notice. Clothes were the same. Stetson got new outfits, crisp blue shirts, well-fitted jeans, while I wore his hand-me-downs, pants slightly too short, shirts slightly too tight. I didn't complain. I'd grown used to taking what was left, used to standing in my brother's shadow. Birthdays were the most painful memories. Stetsons were celebrated at restaurants with balloons, three-tiered cakes, and gifts wrapped in glittering paper. The house buzzed with guests, his friends laughing, our parents beaming as if the world admired the Cole family. I stood in the corner helping Mom carry out plates of cake, cleaning up after everyone left. My birthdays were different. A small cake in the kitchen, just Mom, Dad, and Stetson. Mom always tried to make it special, but Dad offered only brief, perfunctory well wishes before turning back to the TV. "Carson doesn't like a fuss, right?" he'd say, as if he knew me. I nodded, smiled, but inside I wanted to scream that I too wanted to be noticed, loved, valued. As I grew older, the disparity became clearer. Dad always praised Stetson. "That boy's smart, quick. He'll make something of himself." Stetson was sent to private school, given a new computer, encouraged to chase big dreams. Me, Dad looked at me like a failure. "Too quiet, Carson. You need more ambition," he'd say, his eyes full of disappointment. When I chose to work as a garbage collector, he didn't hide his contempt. "The family's shame," he said to my face one evening, a moment etched in my memory. I was 23, fresh into my first job, hoping he'd see I just wanted stability. But he turned away as if I didn't exist. Still, I never fought back. I kept sending $2,000 every month, even if it meant living in a rundown apartment, eating instant noodles for weeks, and wearing the same jacket through 3 winters. I paid for Stetson's college tuition, though he never acknowledged it. I helped buy his first car, a used BMW he flaunted across social media. I did it all because I believed family was more important than my feelings. I believed naively, foolishly, that one day my parents would see my heart, that they'd turn to me, embrace me, and say, "Carson, thank you. You're our pride." But now I knew I'd never been their pride. I sat at the table, took a sheet of paper, and started writing. Not a letter, not an explanation, but a plan. A gift. Not wrapped in ribbons, not glittering like Stetson's birthday presents, but a gift of truth. I would show them who I was, what I'd done, and the price I'd paid, not for revenge, but to free myself. To be seen, heard, recognized, not as a failed son, but as Carson Cole, who loved his family more than himself. I folded the paper, slipped it into my jacket pocket. Outside the window, Denver's sky was still pitch black. But I felt a shift within me. It wasn't triumph or anger. It was clarity. I knew what I had to do, and this time I wouldn't stop. I returned to bed but didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, letting childhood memories pass one last time. I saw young Carson standing in the kitchen corner cleaning up after Stetson's birthday party. I saw teenage Carson, head bowed as Dad called him, the family's shame. I saw present Carson sending $2,000 monthly, taking out a $15,000 loan to please the family. And I saw future Carson, who would no longer stay silent. On Saturday morning, Denver's sky was clear, sunlight glinting brilliantly off the Red Rock cliffs of Red Rock's pavilion, where Stetson's wedding was held. I stood outside the venue in my worn jacket and scuffed, dusty shoes, clutching a small wooden box I'd prepared the night before. Dad had made it clear in that call. I wasn't allowed to attend because my job, my existence, would embarrass the family. But I came anyway, not to disrupt, not for revenge, but to do what I hadn't done in 33 years, to make them see me, truly see me. Inside the reception hall, the scene was opulent like a lavish dream. Tables draped in white silk, perfect clusters of white roses, sparkling chandeliers reflecting off expensive wine glasses. Guests in suits and evening gowns laughed and chatted, the soft strains of a violin mingling with the clink of glasses, creating a symphony of wealth and prestige. My father, Hunter, moved through the crowd in a pristine gray suit, his hair neatly slicked back, his confident smile evoking the powerful banker of old. But I saw the tension in his eyes, as if he were desperately holding on to the perfect image he'd crafted. My mother, Riley, in a pale blue dress, wore a strained smile. Her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Stetson, the center of attention, shone in a black suit, standing beside his bride in a pristine white gown, his smug smile glowing like a stage spotlight. They were the perfect picture of the Cole family, the family neighbors praised, the family I'd sacrificed everything to sustain. I stood at the entrance, silent as a shadow, watching it all. No one noticed me. Servers glided past, important guests were engrossed in conversation. I took a deep breath, gripped the wooden box, and stepped inside. My shoes echoed on the marble floor, faint but sharp, cutting through the music and laughter. A few curious glances turned my way, whispers rippling, "Who's that?" Not an invited guest? But I didn't stop. I walked straight to the main area where the MC, a middle-aged man with a professional smile, held the microphone, ready to introduce the next part of the event. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC's voice rang out, enthusiastic and smooth. "Now, we'll share a family tribute video to celebrate Stetson and his bride's special day." The crowd applauded, the lights dimmed, and the large screen at the front flickered on. That's when I stepped forward. I raised a hand, signaling the MC to pause. "I'd like to say a few words," I said, my voice low but firm, resonating through the vast space. The MC looked surprised, eyeing me from head to toe, a guy in a ratty jacket and dirty shoes, unlike any of the distinguished guests. But he nodded, perhaps thinking I was a relative offering a blessing. He didn't know I was the one the Cole family wanted to hide, the one Dad had banned from appearing. I turned to the crowd, my gaze sweeping over unfamiliar faces, Dad's old friends, Stetson's business associates, media with cameras at the ready. Then I looked at my family. Dad sat at the main table, his eyes icy, jaw clenched as if suppressing rage. "Carson, what are you doing here?" he said, his voice low but threatening, echoing our last call. Mom sat beside him, her eyes wide with panic, her trembling hand touching Dad's, as if to stop him from rising. Stetson, still next to his bride, frowned, his smile vanishing, replaced by a mix of confusion and anger. "Carson, what the hell are you doing?" he asked, his voice rising, almost shrill. "This is my gift," I said, my voice calm but loud enough for the hall to hear. "For Dad, for Mom, and for you, Stetson." I nodded to the technician, and the video began. The screen lit up with the first image, a bank statement, the line, "Transfer $2,000 to Hunter Cole, transaction successful," repeating month after month for 7 years. Whispers spread through the crowd like a small wave. "What's that? Who sent the money?" The next image was my $15,000 loan agreement, my trembling signature clear on the page. Then a photo appeared, me in my orange uniform pushing a garbage cart through Denver's snowy streets, my face weary but resolute, my hands red from the cold. The crowd went nearly silent, only the faint violin lingering from the speakers. Then on a black background, white text appeared, slow and deliberate, like a knife, "For the people I loved more than myself." The hall froze. Laughter, clinking glasses, chatter, all vanished. I looked at Dad. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly on the marble floor, his face flushed, eyes blazing. "Carson," he shouted, his voice booming through the hall, startling a few guests. "You dare do this? You dare ruin your brother's day?" He stepped toward me, pointing, as if ready to slap me on the spot. But he stopped, perhaps because of my gaze, not angry, not afraid, just calm and resolute. Mom burst into tears, her sobs tearing through the silence. She covered her face, shoulders shaking, her pale blue dress crumpling as she hugged herself. "Carson, I'm sorry." She mumbled, her voice choked, but she didn't dare look up, didn't dare face me or the crowd. A few nearby guests turned, their eyes a mix of pity and curiosity. Stetson stood frozen, stepping back and bumping into his bride, nearly knocking her over. "What the hell are you doing, Carson?" he yelled, his voice breaking with anger and shame. His face was red, his hand gripping his wine glass so tightly I thought it would shatter. "This is my wedding. How dare you?" But his eyes wavered, avoiding mine as if he knew the truth in the video was undeniable. His bride tugged his arm, whispering something, but Stetson just shook his head, his expression frantic. The guests began murmuring, their whispers growing into a wave. "That's the older brother? He paid for the whole family? Why wouldn't they let him attend his brother's wedding?" A few pulled out phones, recording the screen, snapping photos, taking audio. A nearby reporter whispered to a colleague, "This'll be the hottest story of the week." I stepped down, walking straight to my parents' table, the crowd parting like water before a ship. I placed the wooden box in front of Dad, looking into his eyes. "This is my gift," I said, my voice steady, not angry, carrying only a deep sadness. Dad stared at me, his jaw tight, but he said nothing more. His trembling hands opened the box, pulling out the original loan agreement, bank statements with dozens of transfer successful entries, and a handwritten card. "For the day my brother is called the family's pride." Mom cried harder, her sobs like another knife in my heart. She stood reaching for me but stopped as if unsure she had the right to touch me. "Carson, I didn't know," she said, her voice breaking, tears streaming down her face. Dad sat back down, gripping the table's edge, his head bowed as if trying to disappear. Stetson turned away, his hands shaking, his wine glass slipping to the floor, shattering with a sharp sound in the silent hall. I gave Mom one last look, then Stetson, my gaze holding no triumph, only quiet sorrow. I turned and walked out of the hall. My shoes echoed on the marble, steady, resolute. Behind me, I heard Mom's cries, the crowd's whispers, a guest saying loudly, "That's the older son. They treated him like that?" The ceremony would continue, I knew, but it was no longer the perfect wedding Dad, Mom, and Stetson had dreamed of. It was now the day the truth was laid bare under the glaring lights of Red Rock's pavilion. I stepped outside, Denver's cold wind soothing the heat in my chest. I felt no victory, no satisfaction. Only relief, as if a ton of weight had been lifted from my shoulders. For the first time, I wasn't a shadow. For the first time, they saw me, Carson Cole, who loved them more than himself. The wedding went on, but in an awkward, tense atmosphere. Gone were the laughter, the toasts, the clinking of sparkling wine glasses. All that remained were uneasy glances, hushed whispers, and the lingering echo of the truth I'd laid bare. I didn't stay to witness it, but I could imagine the scene. Dad sitting motionless, hands gripping the table's edge, his gaze burning a hole through the floor. Mom sobbing, trembling hands covering her face, trying to hide her shame. Stetson frozen, his smug smile gone, replaced by a face flushed with anger and confusion. The guests, who once praised the Cole family as a paragon of perfection, now exchanged looks, no one daring to speak. The video I showed, the bank statements, the $15,000 loan agreement, the photo of me pushing a garbage cart through snow, and the words, "For the people I loved more than myself," didn't stay confined to the reception hall. It spread like wildfire across social media. Someone in the crowd recorded it, posting it to Twitter, then Instagram, then local forums. "Drama at Denver's lavish wedding," one headline read. "Disowned eldest son exposes shocking truth," another article blared. Within hours, the Cole family, the model family neighbors once admired, became the talk of the city. The perfect image that my parents and Stetson had painstakingly built crumbled in a single afternoon, like a sandcastle swept away by the tide. My father, Hunter, who lived for pride, couldn't withstand the shock. I later heard from Mom through a brief text that he lost his composure after I left. He shouted at the event staff, blaming them for allowing that humiliating video to be shown. But he couldn't keep pointing fingers. As the video spread, his old friends, former banking colleagues, and those who once respected him began to avoid him. His phone stopped ringing. Invitations to dinners and weekend golf outings vanished. He locked himself in the suburban house, refusing to see anyone. Neighbors who once called him exemplary and a great parent now only dared glance through their windows, whispering about the eldest son and the shocking truth in the video. Dad's reputation, which he valued more than family, collapsed like a house of cards. My mother, Riley, bore the weight in her own way. Shame and pressure crushed her like an invisible boulder. She'd always been the peacemaker, striving to maintain the Cole family's perfect image. But now, knowing everyone saw her silence, her complicity in letting me carry the family alone, she couldn't face her own reflection. A week after the wedding, she collapsed, hospitalized for exhaustion. A neighbor sent me the news. "Riley's not doing well, Carson. She's not eating, just lying there crying." I read the message, my heart heavy, but I didn't go to the hospital. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew this time I couldn't fix what was broken. Stetson, my brother, didn't escape the fallout either. His carefully crafted image as a successful real estate agent crumbled swiftly. Clients canceled deals, partners distanced themselves, and those who once flattered him turned their backs. His social media accounts were flooded with scathing comments. "Ungrateful. You lived off your brother's money and dared to brag? Your family's a disgrace." Stetson tried deleting comments, but they came faster than he could manage. Eventually, he shut down his profiles, vanishing from the virtual world he'd once lived for. The glossy BMW, the expensive suits, the wine glasses in upscale restaurants, all were now just memories of a fabricated dream. As for me, I chose silence. After the wedding, I took a few days off work, turned off my phone, and locked the door to my small Aurora apartment. I avoided social media, newspapers, and messages from curious reporters or acquaintances. Some called me a vindicator, saying I'd deliberately ruined my brother's wedding to satisfy my ego. Others called me a silent hero, admiring my stand against injustice. I cared for neither. I didn't need anyone to understand me, to praise or criticize me. The truth had done its work. I'd said what needed saying, shown what needed seeing. Now, I just wanted quiet. During those days, I sat in my apartment, staring out at the empty street through the window. I didn't do much, just sipped cold coffee and let my mind wander. I thought of Dad, his expression when the video ended. I thought of Mom, her sobs in the reception hall. I thought of Stetson, how he avoided my gaze as if he knew he was guilty. But above all, I thought of myself. For the first time, I didn't feel I had to apologize for being Carson Cole. I didn't feel the need to prove anything, please anyone, or sacrifice more. While my family faced the collapse of their false image, I found something they never had: true peace. I returned to work, but things were different. I still drove the garbage truck, wore the orange uniform, woke at 4 a.m. But I no longer felt like the shame. I did my job with a new confidence, a sense that I was living true to myself. I stopped checking Stetson's Instagram, stopped waiting for calls from my parents, stopped hoping for thanks I knew would never come. I lived for me, and only me. One evening after a night shift, I found a message from Mom. Just a few brief lines. "Carson, I'm sorry. I'm in the hospital. I don't know what to say." I read it but didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I knew her apology came too late. The truth had been laid bare, and no words could change what had happened. A month after the wedding, the storm of public reaction from the video at the reception gradually subsided, but it left wounds in the Cole family that could never heal. What remained wasn't laughter or reunion, but a vast void filled with silence and regret. I wasn't there to witness it, but I heard fragments of the story from neighbors, through scattered messages from acquaintances. The Cole family, once a symbol of perfection in the eyes of the suburban neighborhood, was now just a sad tale, a topic whispered behind closed doors. My father, Hunter, who had lived for pride and stories of his glory days, was no longer himself. I heard he stopped leaving the house, no longer shared his banking tales with a confident smile. He locked the door, refusing to see anyone, as if hiding from the world's gaze. But what surprised me, through a story from one of Mom's old friends, was that Dad wasn't angry at me anymore. He didn't blame me for the video, for the truth that shattered the family's image. Instead, he was angry at himself. He sat in the dark living room, staring into space, muttering about his mistakes. "I pushed Carson out of the family," he told Mom one night, thinking no one could hear. "The kindest son, and I treated him like that." When those words reached me, they didn't bring satisfaction. They only deepened my sorrow, as if I were watching a man who was once my world, now broken in his own. One morning, returning from an early shift, I found an envelope slipped under my apartment door. No stamp, no address, just a trembling handwritten note. To Carson. I recognized Mom's handwriting instantly. I sat on the sofa, the envelope in hand, my heart suddenly heavy. Part of me wanted to tear it open and read it immediately. Another part wanted to throw it away, leave it as an untouched memory. In the end, I opened it, my rough fingers carefully unfolding the paper. "Carson, my son," the letter began. "I don't know where to start, how to say an apology big enough for what I've done, or rather what I didn't do. I favored Stetson, let your father say hurtful things to you, let you carry this family alone. I knew you sent money every month, knew you worked yourself to exhaustion, knew you took on debt for us. But I stayed silent because I was afraid. Afraid of breaking what your father tried to hold together, afraid of hurting Stetson, afraid to face the truth that I wasn't fair to you. I was wrong, Carson. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for letting things go too far." I read the letter in my small rented apartment, faint light from the window illuminating the handwritten words. I didn't cry, but my chest felt constricted. I no longer resented Mom, Dad, or Stetson. I only felt regret. Regret for the years we could have loved each other, but instead let invisible divides grow. Regret for the moments Mom could have said thank you, but chose silence. Regret for Dad, who lost his kindest son to pride. Regret for Stetson, who lived in illusions, unaware they were built on my sacrifices. And regret for myself, who spent a lifetime waiting for recognition that never came. I folded the letter and placed it on the table. I didn't reply. Not because I couldn't forgive, but because some apologies can't erase the past. Some wounds only time can heal, and some gaps can only be filled by actions, not words. For me, silence was answer enough. Not the silence of indifference, but the silence of someone who'd found peace, who no longer needed to prove who he was. In the days that followed, I returned to my routine. Each morning, I drove the garbage truck through Denver's familiar streets, feeling the city's cold seep into my skin. I didn't check social media, read newspapers, or care about what people said about the Cole family. They were facing the collapse they'd brought upon themselves, just as I'd once faced my own life. Dad would likely live out his days in regret. Mom would carry guilt to her end. And Stetson, he might learn to live authentically or keep hiding in his illusions. I didn't know, and perhaps I no longer needed to. I opened my apartment window, letting the cold Denver air rush in. Outside, the city kept moving, living as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything was different. I was no longer Carson Cole, the forgotten eldest son. I was no longer the one sending $2,000 monthly, borrowing $15,000 to please the family. I was Carson Cole, who stood up, spoke the truth, and found the peace my family never had. And for me, that was enough. 6 months after the wedding, after Mom's letter, after Denver buzzed with whispers about the Cole family, I knew I couldn't stay. Not because I feared facing them or wanted to escape, but because I wanted to start anew, in a place where I wasn't the forgotten eldest son, the man pushing a garbage cart in a viral wedding video. I wanted a place where I could just be Carson, nothing more, nothing less. I packed a few clothes, some old books, and personal items into a worn-out backpack. The small Aurora apartment, with its humming fridge and window overlooking an empty street, was no longer where I belonged. I wrote a short note to the landlord, returned the keys, and drove my old truck north to a small town near Fort Collins. There were no glittering city lights, no towering buildings or bustling streets. Just red dirt roads, sprawling fields, and people who lived slowly, unconcerned with a stranger's past. Here, no one knew who I was, and that made me feel free. I found a job at a private environmental company. Still trash collection, but lighter, more meaningful. No more exhausting night shifts like in Denver. I worked with a small team, quiet laborers like me, people who didn't need to boast or prove anything to the world. We drove through rural roads, picking up waste, sometimes stopping for coffee at a roadside diner. The work wasn't glamorous, but it felt right. Not for anyone else, but for me. Life wasn't instantly easy. The $15,000 loan I took for Stetson's wedding hung over me like a dark cloud. Each month I paid nearly $500 to the bank with sky-high interest. I cut every expense, living more frugally than ever. No dining out, no new clothes, nothing beyond basic necessities. Some nights I sat in my small rented room staring at bank statements on my phone. The debt a harsh reminder of what I'd done to keep the Cole family afloat. But I no longer let it define me. I worked hard, took extra weekend shifts to pay it off faster, and told myself that one day I'd be free of this burden. Not for anyone else, but because I wanted complete freedom. I stopped sending money home. No more $2,000 monthly transfers, no more transfer successful messages that tightened my chest. My father, Hunter, didn't reach out. Neither did Stetson. I wasn't surprised. They were likely grappling with their own wreckage, or perhaps they didn't know what to say. Mom, Riley, was the only one who kept trying. She sent occasional short texts asking about my health. "Carson, are you okay? I worry about you." I read them, no longer resentful, but no longer expectant either. I replied simply, "I'm fine, Mom. Don't worry. Nothing more, nothing less." I didn't want to hurt her, but I also didn't want to return to the cycle of late apologies or unfulfilled expectations. Over time, I settled into my new life. I rented a small room in a wooden house, its window overlooking a grassy field. I started growing vegetables in a corner of the yard, learning from an elderly neighbor. I loved early mornings when mist clung to the grass, sitting on the porch with coffee, listening to birds and feeling a stillness I'd never known in Denver. For the first time, I felt truly alive, not to please anyone, not to carry anyone, but to be myself. One day, my company joined a short documentary series called Clean City Stories, celebrating unsung workers like us. I didn't think much of it, just followed instructions. Stand in front of the camera in a clean uniform and say a few words about the job. I just want to do my part well, I said evenly. Keep the town clean, make it a place worth living in. I didn't mention my past, the Cole family, or the wedding video. To me, that chapter was closed. But when the segment aired, things changed. Someone recognized me, the guy from that wedding video. Articles began appearing, not to criticize, but to praise. The kindest man of the year, one headline read. From family drama to symbol of resilience, another declared. Social media, once flooded with attacks on the Cole family, now brimmed with admiration. Carson Cole is the real hero, one comment said. He sacrificed so much but still rose to live with dignity. I read them on my phone in my small wooden room and smiled. Not smugly, but with the quiet contentment of someone who no longer needed apologies or recognition. The following spring, I enrolled in an evening environmental management course. I had no grand ambitions, no dreams of skyscrapers or million-dollar deals like Stetson's. I just wanted to start a small recycling company, a place to help the community turn discarded things into something valuable. Not to prove anything to my parents, Stetson, or the world, but to live true to what I believed, that everything, even the forgotten, deserves a new chance. Each morning I looked in the mirror, meeting my own eyes. I no longer bowed my head, no longer felt ashamed of my orange uniform or my work. I was no longer the family's shame. My life no longer revolved around making others proud. It was about living so I could hold my head high, smile at my reflection, and know I'd done right, not just for others, but for myself. Mom still sent occasional texts, but I didn't reply much. I wasn't angry, but I knew apologies couldn't change the past. Dad and Stetson remained silent, and I accepted it. Maybe one day they'd reach out, say what they never had. Or maybe not. I no longer waited. I stepped outside, standing under the spring sun, feeling its warmth on my skin. The field stretched before me, green and vibrant. Denver, the Cole family, and all the past's pain were now distant memories. I'd found my path, and this time I'd walk it on my own terms. I thought about what I'd say to those living stories like mine, people who sacrifice silently, who feel forgotten by their families. I'd tell them, don't wait for recognition from those unwilling to give it. Don't let your life be defined by others' expectations. Love, even family love, isn't a transaction where you pay with your very self. Stand up, speak your truth no matter how painful, because the truth, though brutal, will set you free. And when you find peace within yourself, no apology, no recognition can compare. If I could speak to myself 10 years ago, the young Carson standing in the kitchen corner cleaning up after Stetson's birthday party. The teenage Carson bowing his head as Dad called him the family's shame. The adult Carson sending $2,000 monthly and borrowing $15,000 to please the family, I'd say, love yourself as much as you loved them. Stand up even when you're scared. And believe that, even if you're forgotten, you're still worthy of being seen. That's the greatest lesson I've learned, and I carry it with me every day like a torch lighting the path ahead. I stood on the porch under the spring sun, gazing at the sprawling field before me. I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth on my skin. The debt still lingered, but I knew I'd pay it off, dollar by dollar. The Cole family, Denver, and all the pain of the past were now distant memories. I'd found my path, and I'd keep walking it, not to prove anything, but to live true to who I am. For me, that was enough. 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 That was enough.